All right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? All right. So if we can get the slides up, please. All right, so today what I want to talk to you about is our lessons that we learned whilst we grew Altaro from literally 0 to where we are today, which is about 6 million in revenue. So I'm going to cover two main areas. The first area is going to be on how we, the lessons that we learned when we, in terms of growing the business, right? Strategic lessons that we learned. The second half, I will talk about lessons that we learned in terms of culture and in terms of scaling the business. So a little bit about Altaro. So we're a software company. We started back in 2009. We're basically 4 co-founders, myself, Julian, David, and Simon. We started as a bootstrap company, so it's with our own cash. And essentially what we develop is backup software. So backup software, what it is if you've got a laptop and something goes wrong with that laptop, you can use our software to recover the data that you had, your Word files, and so on. So in terms of revenue, so there's a couple of reasons why I want to show you this revenue chart. One, we're very transparent with both internally and externally. We want both our employees to know, where we stand, how the business is growing. There's a couple of lessons in here. So the first one is the beginning was tough. You can see there we're 4 co-founders. All the expenses that we had, the first year, 3,400 euros. Second year, 66K. And then third year, it starts growing up, 150K and so on. So, every startup has a different journey, but the most common theme with all startups is the journey is tough at the very beginning, especially. The second lesson here is from 150K went up to 600K in that year in 2011 down to up to 2012. And I'll explain a little bit further why that happened. Today we sell in about 110 countries. We've got about 60 employees, and we should hit about 6.2 million. So first lesson. First lesson is bootstrap as much as possible. And for those of you who don't understand what bootstrapping is, so bootstrapping is basically using your own funds to fund the company, trying not to get external investment. But as such, that's not the lesson that I'm trying to, that we learned. It's more about the mentality of bootstrapping. So the mentality of bootstrapping is thinking about how you can keep your costs as low as possible. There are, you see a lot of articles out there. You see, stuff on magazines, on websites about these startups who get funding. The first thing they do, they've got chefs, cooking for people, lunch for people. They're sending everyone to Las Vegas for team building. That's all wasted cash. All the money that you have at the beginning should all be spent on driving revenue for the business. I'll give you a couple of examples. So when we first started out, after a couple of years, we were in a semi-basement. Everything that we had was secondhand. Our plumbing system got clogged up, literally backed up, clogged up, stinks, waterworks. It was terrible. Rather than calling in a plumber, David, one of our co-founders, literally had to get his hands dirty to fix the problem. It took him half a morning, but he got it done. And that's 100 euros that we saved getting a plumber in, right? So that's 100 euros you can spend on marketing. That's 100 euros you can spend on driving revenue for the business. So again, when I talk about bootstrapping, it's the mentality of bootstrapping. Even if you get 10 million or 5 million or 50K, you have to always keep in mind, think of bootstrapping. That's the way you should grow your business. The second lesson we learned is consumers nearly killed us. So we started out in the fancy world of B2C. So B2C is the nicest place to be because you can tell your friends about it. You can have nice fancy campaigns that reach everybody and so on. Well, the first 3 years, that was tough. The problem with focusing on consumers is that if you've got a 40-euro product and a consumer phones you up because they've got an issue or they've got a question, if you spend 15 minutes on that phone call with a consumer, you've lost all your profit margin. In fact, you're probably losing money on that deal. So that's a lesson we learned quite early on, and that's when we got the jump between 150K up to 600K, because in that year, we said we're going to switch our focus from consumer onto businesses. So the lesson here as such is not ignore consumers, because the consumer market obviously is massive, and there's a lot of money to be made. The lesson for us was look at the opportunities where you can make the most money. So the consumers, the subset of consumers maybe who will give you the most money, where you can charge the most money, especially at the beginning. Because as I mentioned, if you try to target everyone straight away with a cheap product that goes for everyone, sometimes it's actually harder than it is to focus on someone and make the most out of them. So a mistake I see a lot of companies make is that they try to be everything to everyone. If you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being everything to no one. You have to focus. You have to find somebody to love. You have to look for someone that you can put all your energy into. And by that, I mean you need to find a niche. You need to find a subset of people who really want your product. I've seen countless companies, even in Malta, where they open up an online store, for example. And the online store, they'll have 1,000 products, right? 1,000 products. You're a three-person company. You've got 1,000 products in your online store. If I phone you up because I've got a question about one of your 1,000 products, there's a 0% chance you're going to be able to help me, right? You have to really focus down and take over a market and find somebody that you can really be passionate about. Every company you can think of that's been successful, if you look at Facebook, if you look at Amazon, we all know the stories. They all started out by focusing on a particular market. If it's books, if it's colleges, and then once you've totally mastered that market, that's when you move on. And I see this mistake happening over and over and over again. The fourth lesson in terms of strategy and sort of running the business that we learned was saying no. And when I talk about saying no, I'm not talking about, there's a marketing campaign that you want to run or you want to buy a new coffee machine and you say no. It's actually saying no about opportunities. As your business starts to grow, lots of opportunities start coming your way. And the easiest thing to do when opportunities come your way is to say yes to everything. So we had a situation, I think it was about 5 years ago, where someone from China, a distributor, a really good distributor in China, wanted to represent us within China. That's a really good opportunity, potentially millions of euros worth of revenue there. As a business, we've always stuck to our core of a particular market. We focus on a particular type of IT administrator. And we also focus on our top 10 countries. So even though we sell in 120 countries, we focus on our top 10. US, Canada, France, the top 10 you can think of, those are our top 10 countries. So it was a really tough decision to actually say no to China, because saying yes to China means we have to change our focus a little bit. We have to start thinking about the Chinese market. So potentially a lot of revenue coming in, but that takes focus away from our core 10 countries. So the lesson we learned here is wherever you see lots of opportunities come in, don't just immediately just try to catch on to everything because they look exciting. Really think about what's going to take you away from your focus and what's going to keep you on your focus. So the second half, I want to talk about some lessons we learned in terms of culture and some lessons we learned in terms of scaling up the business. So group decision making. So the fancy thing to do when you're a startup, even beyond being a startup, is to get people around a table and just throw ideas and everybody exchanges ideas, or you've got a campaign you're thinking of, let's get everyone in. You get the salesperson, you get the marketing person, you get the technician, you get everybody in, developer, and everyone's sharing ideas, and everyone's deciding what's the right path for the company, everyone's deciding what the right campaign is, everyone's deciding what the right product is. That's a mistake. It's wrong. It happens over and over again. When you get a lot of people in a room and you ask for everybody's opinion and you take a decision as a group, you actually get the most diluted version of that idea out. And I'll give you an example of this. There was a really good video going around, making the rounds about 10 years ago. This video was set in the Stone Age, and it was before fire was invented. And so the sort of captain comes out, so the tribe leader comes out, and he's got a stone, and on the stone he draws fire, red and with chalk and stuff like that. And then he's got, some of his tribesmen. There's about 5 of them around the stone table, and he tells them, look, we've got this invention. This invention is called, we're calling it fire. With fire, you can heat up your food, you can keep warm, and you can scare off people at night. What are your thoughts? So they look at it and they're thinking about it, and the first one speaks up, and he looks at the stone, looks at the fire, says, so you're telling me it's hot, right? And I can get burnt, and my kids can get burnt. Yes, that looks dangerous. Okay. And the second one goes on, that's red. I don't like red, because when I see red, I think of blood. When I think of blood, I think of death. Does it come in green? Says, no, it doesn't come in green. So then they sort of start discussing things together, and in the end say, okay, we've got the solution. What if we had a cold fire, which didn't heat up? That would be something I would buy. And that happens every day, right? So if you're in a business and you're running meetings and you've got people in the room, and everybody's giving their ideas and everyone's giving their thoughts, then sometimes that can get diluted down to something that actually doesn't really work. So really focus on who are the right people you want to involve in the different discussions and different meetings. So as you start scaling, one thing that, if you read all the HR manuals, management books, if you have an HR manager, what happens is that you start doing things called performance appraisals, right? Once a year or once every few months, you get a list of 5 things somebody is good at and 5 things somebody is bad at. You might have a rating system, 1 to 5, and so on. The problem is, as you're trying to scale, that actually is really tiring and very difficult to do. If you're hiring lots of people, you're kind of trying to keep up with yourself. Even if you're just a five-member team, it's kind of hard to do that consistently. So I'm proposing a different method of managing your team. And I'm calling it the one-hit wonder. So if you look at sports, there's 2 types of coaches. There's a bad coach and a good coach. A bad coach, if you take something like golf, he'd come up to you and he'd tell you, listen, so your feet are positioned badly, your swing needs to be a bit harder, you need to look up. He'll give you like 5 or 6 points that you need to work on. A good coach will come up to you and he'll tell you, listen, your foot positioning is wrong. Let's work on that. And you work on that, and then you swing, and then you swing, and then you swing. And until you've got your foot positioning right, he won't move on to the next stage. And that's exactly the same concept here. So instead of every few months going through 5 points that they need to work on, so on and so forth, pick one thing. Pick one thing you want them to work on, and spend the next 2 months empowering them to solve the problem. Every couple of weeks, when you have your one-on-one meetings with them, focus on that one problem, try to fix that one problem, and then move on to the next thing. That's easy, because that's one problem which you talk about, which you try to fix, and then you move on to the next thing. If you're talking about building up big performance appraisals and so on, that takes up a lot of time. So this is a nice hack to, as you're scaling, as you're growing, it saves you a lot of time. And a couple more here. So one thing I learned a few years ago was all around making decisions. So very often you're faced with a decision where sometimes you don't even know which is the right decision. So it could be a case of you have 2 candidates you want to hire. They're both good. They both have different pros and cons, and you can't make a decision between which one is the right one. It could be a product. It could be features. It could be a project. It could be anything. Very often we're faced with a dilemma. Which one should I choose? When you're faced with something like that, very often what happens is that you start diving even deeper, right? You start thinking about it. You really try to extract what is the right decision to make. Something I learned a long time ago, if you want to move quickly, it doesn't actually matter which decision you take. It doesn't matter. If you've got a choice between 2 candidates and they've got different pros and cons and you really can't decide between them, don't run a SWOT analysis on which one you think is better. Don't spend hours trying to interview and get deeper and deeper and deeper until you figure out which one is better. At that point in time, if they're nearly equal, flip a coin. It doesn't matter. You need to make a decision and move on. The longer you take trying to make decisions and figure things out, it's just wasted time. You don't have that time. And the final point here is about going international. So again, when you look at companies like Google and some other companies, when they move to, let's say, Ireland and they set up a business in Ireland and they've got they hire all these hipsters and everyone's, they've got all this culture and all this stuff. Well, I can tell you, when you're scaling and when you're growing a business, you're not setting up an office and hiring 20 people in Ireland. If you take us, the reason why we scaled we're in 5 different countries at the moment in terms of employees. We need 1 person in the States. That's the first person we're going to hire. Most likely it's going to be for sales, right? Because you need someone on the ground. 1 person in the UK, that's most likely going to be for sales. I don't say thinking about, this person I'm going to hire. Is he good enough to sit around the campfire, singing Kumbaya with the team and things like that? That's not what I think about. What you have to think about when you're hiring your first people outside of your country is, can they get the job done? That's the most important thing. If they're a salesperson, can they get the job done? If you've got someone who's got great culture and perfect fit with the Malta office and blah, 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 but then they can't get the job done, in 6 months, they're not even going to be there. So your number 1 priority when you're going beyond your borders is, for me, can they get the job done? And focus fully on that. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time.